Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with your hosts, Jefferson Belfort and Brian Hernandez. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, man. I'm doing really good. It feels good to hear those words again, to hear that intro again. It's feels right. So no, I'm really excited. Man, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. It's been some time. It's the first week of the NFL season, and what is the best way to deal or to prepare for the NFL season? Is to talk some basketball. So
Yeah.
Um, it definitely, I joke, I laugh with that, but it's good to know that the two biggest sports, honestly, in my life right now are coming back. One already starting, and then basketball right around the corner. Off season was not that loud as it usually is, so it makes for us to have a really, really fun pod.
Yeah.
I mean, our fun time going into this beginning of the season because honestly, a little bit need that fix. Haven't had that much of that basketball fix this last couple months.
Yeah, it's I am I am itching for some basketball, which I am pretty glad that it's gonna start back soon. Any week now. And then we're gonna be seeing a lot more news happening. A lot of these teams are actually starting to train again. But like you said, the perfect time for us to get back into this, the perfect time for us to actually record again. I was actually just trying to look when the last time we recorded and what was actually happening at the time. Wasn't able to pull it up fast enough, but like we didn't talk about anything that's happened. Like definitely wasn't playoffs at the time. Uh no trades and anything that's happened since then. So I am really excited to actually get into everything. Actually get your thoughts because we haven't talked as much about everything. So it should be fun.
Definitely, I agree. And I mean, as like I said, I did say that it was quiet. It was just quiet compared to typical off seasons we've seen the last couple of years.
Yeah.
We know there's reasons why behind that, but we'll talk about that as well as we get into it. So the topics for today are first we're going to go over, obviously, as we just mentioned, the off-season winners and losers, and then we will go over some of the players that we believe have to prove what they have to prove. I mean, I butchered that. It's been a while. It's been a while,
Yeah.
Brian. Like
Getting back into it.
and, it's players with the most to prove this upcoming season. So, Brian, are you ready?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
All right, perfect. I guess I'll start it off with one of mine. We could go back and forth that way. All right, so I'm gonna leave the obvious one to you, being that it is your team, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about that, and I'll add my
Yeah.
own 2 cents to it at the end. But I think it's I'm gonna go for a more low key winner of the off season, and that winner I chose is the San Antonio Spurs.
Ooh.
The San Antonio Spurs really quietly had a pretty productive offseason. They moved a pick and I remember during the draft when they picked up Dillingham and they also got Castle. I was like, what
Hmm.
like why would you get both of these guys? And then they move that pick to the T Wolves and then they get some picks back, right, from that. Then they bring in Chris Paul, a veteran to that lineup, to that team that is not only just going to help all around with Wemby's development in this year, but also help them compete, right? I, I might I would say it's too early to say if they're going to be contending for anything
Hmm.
like a playoff spot in that sense, but it is moving towards the right directions with those decisions. And then another aspect to it is bringing in also that 2031 pick by just adding themselves into that Kings trade for DeMar DeRozan. is another quiet like move that they did that no one really is talking about, but they're making the most out of they're maximizing the moves that they used in this summer, and I really did see them as a winner for me this offseason.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought them up. They were also on my list. Um, yeah, man, the Spurs they're going to be good. It's like you said, are they going to be contenders? Who knows? Who's to say? But when you got someone like Wemby, that guy is a game changer. He is the things that he was able to do at the end of last season was pretty unbelievable. Seeing him just even in the Olympics this year, like you could see the passion, like him crying after they lost, and like I don't know, just as an observer, never expected France to get anywhere close to actually beating USA and everything. Like I really didn't even think there was a chance, but like you can see this kid really believed it. He put everything into it. Like that's what you want to see from your star player. That's what you want to see from the next generational player. And this guy has it. And so what do you need to do in order to make this guy good in the future is a lot of development and a lot of coaching and a lot of leadership. You bring in the perfect person. If you asked me beforehand, who is someone that you would want to pair Wemby with, especially on this team, the Spurs, I really don't know if there's a better name than Chris Paul. Of like one, you need someone to run point. You need someone to actually run the offense, and Chris Paul can do that. Even though yeah, he's old, like he's not going to be great. You don't want him on your championship team running your offense, but for this type of role, having like that type of guy, that's gonna be crazy. What is it? Just a 1 year deal, but like that's that's a good thing. You don't have to trade any assets for that. You don't have to do anything like that. And then the craziest thing to me was when Chicago did that trade with a Sacramento and they gave DeMar DeRozan. They didn't even or Chicago didn't even get like the best asset back, and the Spurs got Harrison Barnes. Like Harrison Barnes, all right. Is he a fantastic player? Is he a star player? No, of course. But that's a good solid piece. Like that is a really good solid
Yeah.
piece. So this team goes from absolutely awful. You get a generational player. He brings your ceiling up. A lot of excitement. And now you add two really good veteran pieces on there. Like there's a difference. Detroit brings in they do these trades. They do a bunch of trades in the offseason because they want to actually get developmental pieces. And who's their leadership developmental guy? Tim Hardaway Jr. Bleh. Like, bleh.
Yeah, a me type of player, you know? It's
Yeah,
all about me type of player.
exactly.
It's
Like,
not
yeah, is he a veteran? Is he a professional? I'm sure. But there's a big difference between you get a champion in Harrison Barnes, a guy that's always been a consummate professional, really good, and you get Chris Paul, who's been a star, been all these things. Like, it's a no-brainer. That's a great offseason. That makes me really excited for San Antonio just in the future. I wanted to get your thoughts. So I feel like there's a lot of talk around um, about the Spurs and like how good are they going to be this year. I wanted to get your thoughts, Jeff. How many wins do you think this team gets? I think the Hoop Collective with Windhorse and all those guys, they've been talking about this, and I feel like it's a good topic of conversation. But like, I don't remember exactly what the line that they came up with, if it was like 43 or 45 wins. But where do you think they land up?
I mean, you kind of want to put it in your mind that the similar situation Chris Paul was placed in, doing this a few years back with that OKC team, helping right the ship for them, and then also helping a player of the likes of Shea become the player that he needs to be, or the MVP, that potential MVP candidate that we know him to be now, right? I and that went to the play. They went to the playoffs that year, so
Yeah.
that's I don't know. It's hard to say. I think for me, they're competing for a play-in spot right now.
Yep.
It's more of It's more of it's not an indictment on them as it is more of indicative of what the conference looks like, right? Maybe even if you rattled off a bunch of the teams that's there, I know Wemby probably is the better like number one option out of some of these teams that will be competing. But the thing is, there's a little bit more foundation laid out that is there. I think that it does help that they finally put a playmaker in front of Wimby though, right?
Mm,
Because that was what they were lacking last year. Running out Sohan for the point,
yeah.
trying to test that out was not working, right? Obviously, Graham didn't, and he didn't come back, but Graham didn't pan out to be the point that you needed, right? You have guys that at this point you believe in too, like a Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, that will also grow with this team. So I think that I think that it's best to just put them in contention for a play-in right now. So 7 to 11 seed, if they win, well, that's the scary part because then it goes back to what you're saying. The 43 was that number. You
I
would
believe so,
need
yeah.
to have more than 43 to be in that playing conversation.
I was
So
just about to say the plan from last year. So 7 to 10 was Lakers were at 7 with 47 wins. Yeah, 47 wins. Pelicans with 49, Kings with 46, and Warriors with 46. So they would have to be above if you think they're gonna make the play in. And last year the Spurs won
yeah,
22 games.
I mean, I think they're if yeah, like an amazing season for them is to get into that plains conversation.
Hmm.
Um, 145, 146, 47, and even that might be harder this year, it feels like, for them to do that. But if they stay in that place, that's a great season. For them, incremental progress is not a bad thing to get to 40 wins. I think 40 wins is where I'm going to land at. 41, 42, around that window of wins. And I expect them to be like world beaters in any way, but I do see Wemby taking a step up from what he was last year,
Yeah.
just having now a competent playmaker in front of him. And
Nah,
now
I agree.
that'll be the difference of 20 games. Yeah, in my mind.
Yeah, there's difference in 20 games. It feels like they were just like tanking last year too. Of like we throw
Yeah,
Sohan at the point guard, you're tanking. Like that's what it is. Yeah, you're trying
yeah,
to develop him, but no, developing your power forward guy into a point guard is really you're just tanking right there. So especially too, you got like a coach like Greg Popovich, it definitely
yeah.
seems possible. Like you upgraded immensely. I feel like Devin Vassell was like injured a decent amount last year. I've always been very high on Devin Vassell for a while too. So no, I think the team's gonna be pretty good. I think the team's gonna be pretty good. There's a couple teams that I'm a little bit lower on. Actually, not. There's only one team I can really see on the West that took a big step down that we can get to later. Um, but yeah, other than that, everyone else kind of got a little bit better. So it's tough.
Yeah.
The West is very tough. Next, so you left it for me. I'm gonna have to take it now. So we're talking about
Hello.
off-season winners, and when I bring up my New York Knicks, I'm not saying that this is the best off-season, but this is easily one of the best off seasons in the league because I definitely think there's at least two that you can say that had a better offseason. But let me just talk about the Knicks real quick. So, as we all know, Jeff, your boy, Mikal Bridges, he's now a New York Knick. It's I don't
Who?
know,
He he ain't
Brooklyn
my boy.
Bridges.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
got amnesia with players, man. Once they're gone, I don't know who they are.
I know, man. You were so high on my boy Bridges right now. I mean, I was always a big fan. I always said on here, hey, I'll trade everything for this guy. Like that's the one person that like is a
Yeah,
perfect fit for the team. They went on and did it. They traded the treasure trove, and it it excites me. I think it's really good. Like all these years, there's been talk about the Knicks needing to do an all-in move, and they ended up doing it. This is what their all-in move, and I know there's a lot of criticism about like, hey, you trade all these first-round picks for someone who's never made an All-Star team. Um, Personally, I'm like totally comfortable with that. I there's 2 points of it that or at least there's one main thing. Actually, yeah. Let me actually go into two. Let me take a step back. So one, I'm trying to find a star player to match with Jalen Brunson. Um, it's tough. It's very tough to do that because you look at the strengths of Jalen Brunson, like fantastic scorer. The weaknesses is really just like too small to really play enough defense. So, all right, who's available as a star? You they could have traded for Donovan Mitchell in the past. Everyone agrees, not a great fit. You look at all these other players, and it's always just comes to like just not a great fit. And then there's also like the ego thing. There's like you want to get someone that can actually fit the locker room, fit all these things, not ruin any of the chemistry. And it's hard to do that with a lot of these other star players, but Mikal Bridges is actually like one of the perfect guys. Now, is he a star? Is he not? Still, I guess remains to be seen. There's a lot of conversations of him becoming that star in Brooklyn. Um, but I think the biggest thing to me is like, yeah, they traded all these picks, but anytime you look at a lot of these big trades for picks, it's not only just picks. Like you're also giving up like really good young players, and thankfully the Knicks didn't have to do any of that. It was just like trade Bogdanovich, and you trade all these picks, and then you do a sign and trade with Shake Milton. Like there's nothing really that crazy there. But like you look at someone like with Donovan Mitchell, you trade all those picks, and you trade Lauri Markkinen, and you trade Colin Sexton. You look at all those trades always include the Kevin Durant trade. Trade all those picks, and you trade Mikal Bridges, and you trade Cam Johnson. Like to me, those players are honestly worth the same, if not more, than those picks. So now you kind of just cut that in half. You only do the picks. To me, it's a win-win at the end of the day, and this is the reason why you do that. And then just the rest of the offseason was actually pretty great, other than just Mikal. Of like, you bring back OG. Yeah, it's a little bit overpay, but like, it's not obscene. It's not terrible. And especially when you're able to re-sign someone like Jalen Brunson in that number that he took, that's going to help in the future. Like that kind of evens it out a lot more. And that's also the reason why you do a Mikal Bridges trade, because it gives you a more likely chance to re-sign Jalen Brunson in that number. There's already talks about Mikal Bridges potentially re-signing off of his number right now. And so like overall, a lot of really good stuff. They did some interesting stuff in the draft. Nothing too crazy to really talk about now, but overall, this team got significantly better. Yeah, you lose Hartenstein. That was always probably going to happen regardless, which stinks. But overall, ceiling has risen, and hey man, the team's gonna be pretty dang good. Let me hear your thoughts. I went on a long rant there.
No, I agree with a lot that you said. I have a series of questions to ask,
For sure.
and then I'll go into my thoughts of it. Right. First question: does this put you in your mind right up there with the Celtics?
Um, I would say, I mean, it still remains to be seen. Like, I got to see how all these things fit. In my mind, it seems like it's going to fit pretty seamlessly. So I would say yes. Like, I think the Celtics are still technically better. Like, they have stronger players, like a better roster. But I think if it's like, it's pretty similar to me as like a 1A and a 1B type of thing. Like, yeah, the B is kind of less type of stuff, but it's really not too far off.
Okay. Um, with that in mind, obviously things change, like you said too.
Yep.
In about 2 years, like okay, not that's probably a dumb question to ask. Better question to ask
All
is, what
right.
is your window? What do you think is the window of this squad currently comprised of what it looks like?
It seems like it's, I mean, all the numbers, at least a lot of the reporting out there, it's like that 4 or 5 year type of window because of
Okay.
what Jalen Brunson was able to do. Like, because he was able to take that less money, kind of really opens up the flexibility for everything else. And that's also the reason why, like, you can't extend Julius Randle right now and give him a max, because if you do that, it kind of erases everything that Jalen Brunson just did. So,
Okay.
and especially too, if Mikal Bridges is able to extend off that number, then it just makes it so much easier to keep those four main guys together, the Villanova guys. Um, so it really seems like the window is like that 4 or 5 years max, if anything, which in today's CBA is almost unheard of, or it seems like it's going to be unheard of.
Yeah. And it's gonna take a jump, right? Like
Yeah.
the dollars are gonna go up. So the fact that, like you said, Bridges already took that lesser money, and then Mikal Bridges is slated to do the same, is only gonna help with that situation to retain guys like Dante, keep guys like
Yeah.
uh, Josh Hart when it's time to pay for them too. Last question then. What do you think? What do you narrow down? What is your mind? Play GM right now. Um, Decision on the depth on the center spot. What do you think about that? Or I'm sure you put time to think
Yeah.
into that. Kind of go over what are you thinking right now, or who do
Yeah.
you have in mind?
So it's kind of interesting. So this entire like off season, of course, there's a lot of talk, and there has been conversations about like, oh, do you trade for like Walker Kessler right now? Do you trade for whoever, Mark Williams, or like any of these other kind of centers out there? Um, and I heard the reporter for the Athletic, Fred Katz, who covers the Knicks, actually had a really
Mhm.
good take on it. That was like, you don't make that trade now. Like, you wait at least a little bit into the season to see how things work out, because the Knicks don't have that many more assets. Like, sure, yeah, you have like someone you could trade, potentially Julius Randle. Sure, you can maybe move Mitchell Robinson's contract, and then you have maybe like three kind of first round picks that are like kind of crappy, and then you have a couple seconds. Like, the assets aren't that great. There's plenty of other teams that have better assets out there if you're trying to compete for a trade right there. But you don't make that move now, because if you trade all those picks, then if you go into the season and those guys that trade you just didn't work out, there's nothing you can do anymore. Like, you're kind of just locked in, which makes it very tough. So the biggest idea, or the smartest idea, is wait, see how the season pans out, see how Mitchell Robinson's doing, see if he gets injured or not, type of thing. And if you really need to bring in someone else, yeah, Precious does in that role. If you need to bring someone else in, then you can do that. But first, see where the holes are. So I don't have a great answer um, for you for that, which feels like a cop out. But
No,
I
no, no
yeah,
cop out. So wish list.
yeah,
Give me a wish list guy then.
a wish list
If
guy.
you could, don't think about the contract, don't think about the
Yeah.
money, like in any way. Just like a fit. Who do you think would be a fit as a center and
So I
on
don't know
the
if
squad?
every like like smart Knicks fan out there would kind of agree. When I actually saw the rumor, so when I think about Isaiah Hartenstein, the biggest thing to me was like the passing. Like, yeah, cool rebounding and everything, like that was great, but the biggest thing that unlocked the offense, and this is going to be like to see how they can change this, because Julius Randle, while a big guy and is a good passer, not the level of Isaiah Hartenstein. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's like, how can we get someone else that has a very similar skill set? And it's like, all right, who are the other guys that can do something like that? There's really not that many. Of course, you got Jokic as the highest level, but then someone else that I saw that was like kind of the in between level, not sure what his team is thinking, is Şengün, Alperen Şengün. It's like, what there's like the contract situation that's kind of up in the air right now. I doubt they'll trade him, but like that's like kind of my wish list of The guy, he's not terrible on defense. Like I don't really care that much about it, especially when you have like OG McCall there. Like you can kind of sacrifice some stuff that I wouldn't mind with, but just seeing how Şengün can like pass and all the things that he can do, and even then still he's a pretty solid rebounder. Um, just like opening up the offense that much more, that would get me pretty excited. Now, like I said, is that even realistic? I think it's maybe a 1% chance, if that. But that's kind of my wish list right now.
All right, perfect. All right, well, my thoughts on them is as it pains me to say, as you mentioned, seeing a trade where the Nets have a player of value and going to the Knicks, and the Knicks having
It's wild.
that said player now is not easy to see, right? But it is what it is. It is a business. People get moved, and there's reasons why they get moved, and clearly. The project was a failing project on the Nets' part of what they expected out of Mikal Bridges. It was just asking him to be something he truly is just not,
Yep.
and it's okay if you're not that guy, you know. So in this case, I think that moving him from becoming what subsequently was your first option on that Nets team to now being more of a possibly a third,
Yeah.
fourth, maybe second option on the team. Like if he's having an amazing season, he's the second option, right?
Yeah.
Um, is by far the best position for him to be. We've seen how he's excelled at that position in the past when he was in Phoenix. His game unlocked a little bit. We saw in that first couple of weeks when he was with the Nets, and that's why all of that potential, quote unquote potential, was starting to be felt around him. But I think him going to the Knicks allows him to go back to being that high level role player or even high level fringe all star at that point that he can be, and
Yeah.
that at this point in this league is more important than a guy that it's easier to insert a guy like that than a Dame Lillard, like the Bucks just did last year, right? So it by far is a good move in my mind that they did that. Um, I also believe that, yeah, you're right in the conversation with the Celtics for best in the conference, right? After making a move like that. Because this now raises the team that already had like the 10th best defensive efficiency last year. Now takes them to another zenith, right? Like by doing that, right? And then they're able to also obviously, like you said, losing Isaiah Hartenstein hurts you on your depth and your center depth in that case. But I think that this move with Mikal Bridges allows for a lot of flexibility for that roster, right? The team looks a lot is able to mix and match a lot of pieces now that might be a gauntlet or a nightmare for offensive players going into the season. And then lastly, the one thing, the moment or the thing of concern that I have is as much as it was a great year last year, we do have to always add context to what happened. Is the difference between the 2 seed to the seventh seed in the
Yep.
East last year was about 2 games. So if something goes wrong for any of these teams, it does not just consider the Knicks into this, can be or change how you view a team. So with that in mind, our viewpoint of how the season ended greatly affected how
Yep.
we saw the Knicks. I'm not saying that to take away anything from the Knicks because I think that they are the one that took the biggest leap in the East Conference last year by making this move. But it makes me worry. It makes me as a Nets fan not be as upset that we're getting picks back in this because you just don't know. We really cannot. You cannot track what's going to happen in a year even at
True.
this point in the league. So it is. I think it was a win-win for both teams and both of their reasons why they did it. I think it takes the Knicks to that level right there with the Celtics, and I think that they need two, and it's important, it's imperative in my mind that they find, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a five, but it needs to be another four or five that can fit into there. Because I do like Precious for what he is, but if you could find a guy like, I know the Pacers won't do a trade with you,
Yeah.
but hey, what's the conversation around a guy like a Jabari Walker, right?
Mm.
Like, do you have that conversation with him? Are they still high on a guy like that? That guy's buried down in in the depth chart with what they're doing right now. You got Obi on top of him. You have Siakam on top of him. But this is a pick you just got last year. He can't even see the court right now.
Yeah.
So a guy like that is another. I think you throw in the word a little project, uh, but a guy that I think has a ceiling that you could raise to fit into the team because I think the Knicks just decide to lean into the small ball that could work for them as well too.
Yeah, there's a lot of different moves they can make. I mean, it seems like yeah, you can trade for like a Walker Kessler or any of these other guys, but like even some of those, like you mentioned, those guys that are just like sitting off of the bench and like barely getting any playing time, like your third string center. Like a lot of teams actually have like a pretty solid amount of like third string centers that maybe you can trade on the low for. Like Orlando, I feel like just has like 50 centers on their roster, and I doubt they'll really maybe do a trade. But yeah, there's a lot of moves out there. The one thing I wanted to before we move on, uh, touch on with the Macau thing, I feel like
Mhm.
I'm very interested to see how he bounces back after last year because hearing him in interviews and everything. Yesterday, I was actually the Knicks had like a little block party thing. I actually went to it. Wife got me tickets for it, so that was actually a lot of fun. So it was like Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Macau was there. They had like a bunch of other guests come through, and just hearing him like, I feel like he's consistently said like, yeah, that last year in Brooklyn was really tough, and you can kind of see, and it always kind of seemed like he was a little bit unhappy. And I don't know, you think about like your own life and think about work and stuff like that. If I'm not happy, like I don't perform as well. If I'm happy, then I perform way better. And like seeing how happy when Mikal first got traded to the Nets and seeing like how he was doing, am I saying is he going to replicate any of that? No, but it definitely seems like that kind of it seems like he's going to come into the season like pretty happy. It seems like there's going to be a lot of good vibes coming through. And I do think that that makes a big difference. And that's why they always talk about like chemistry and all those type of things. So I'm excited to see the bounce back and the potential, but it definitely seems like he's going to be maybe your second or third option, like you were saying. And then you got to remember Julius Randle's on this team. He didn't play so much of last year, so we'll see what happens. Maybe he will regress like he usually does. So maybe I shouldn't be so excited to say his name, but who knows? We'll see what happens.
I also wanted to say I made a mistake. I meant Jarris Walker, not Jabari Walker.
There you go. I wasn't sure if you meant Jalen Smith as well, or whatever, but I think he's off the roster at the moment. But yeah,
No, no.
yeah, yeah.
Jarris Walker was the pick that they got last year,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
2020.
It was pretty solid.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
like you said, buried.
Um, but okay, I guess
What's
we'll
your
move on
next?
to losers. Um, I think I said before I was going to go with with a little bit low key one, but now I'm gonna go with a pretty obvious one. And I thought honestly, I think the theme is, and it's not a team. It's not a team. It's not. I'm gonna go with stagnation.
Hmm.
Stagnation is the loser of this off season, and that's to wrap it. That is the Miami Heat. That is the Warriors. That is the Lakers in my mind. These teams made no marginal moves over this offseason. And these are teams, if we're really thinking about it, the last couple of years, these teams have dominated the conversation around
Yeah.
moves lately, right? But I think to put a bow on it and just like not use that cop out of not choosing a specific team, I think that I have to, if I'm going to choose out of the three, who it's going to be the most damning to is the Heat. The Heat by far have been not just stagnant this year, they've been stagnant a couple years now. It's just the fact that
Yep.
they've been in conversation, they have done things that have exceeded our expectation, that is hiding the competency of like what they've been doing the last couple years. And the fact is, they've been in the conversation for numerous superstars. But yet, Jimmy Butler is the only player of note that is on that team. Well, no disrespect to everybody on the team. Of course, we love Bam, we love Tyler Hero, and all of that. But like to the point of where we've been talking about superstars wanting to go to Miami, and Jimmy Butler is still the only one there. And now we're going to an offseason where there's there's it's a little contentious with the situation with Pat Riley, where Pat Riley left off the exit interview saying what he expects out of Jimmy Butler and what he doesn't expect out of Jimmy Butler in such a way to kind of raise eyebrows, right? Like making note that, hey, like if you're not on the court, there's no point to talk, right?
Yep.
The aspect that Jimmy wanted to get a contract this summer. And we know it, we know the famous line now. You paid Tobias over me? Like that's something that is still gonna echo through Jimmy's mind. And now he's seeing it happen again where they're not paying him. And he's going into this last season with the Heat with a team. How did they improve? I mean, like they haven't taken any significant swing, and this is a team that just recently, in the last 5 years, has gone to three Eastern Conference Finals, two NBA Finals in the last 5 years, and they did nothing to get better. So it's got to be the Miami Heat for me in this offseason.
Nah, I agree. They were also on my list, and it's exactly kind of what you're saying. Of they just are not making any substantial move, and like you said, all right, they're all these superstars want to go there. They want to do this trade. They're always in trade talks, and then you see what are they offering? It was always like we're gonna give you Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson and maybe one first. Give me Damian Lillard. It's like they're trying to give the worst packages out there for all these players. They have literally nothing. It's so crazy. And like exactly what you're saying, it's kind of crazy that they've just made like no moves, but yet somehow they keep getting these guys out of nowhere of I feel like Hayward Highsmith, whatever, like no one even heard of this guy. They every year they get one guy out of nowhere to play really well and just it's kind of wild to me. Um, yeah, this team is something else. Just even them losing Caleb Martin as well, and like I feel I feel like I kind of heard the conversation a little bit, at least if I remember correctly at the time when this was all going down. It was like it seemed like Miami really thought they're gonna get Caleb Martin again and like re-sign him, and then he just signs his Philly type of thing, and they had like no idea. They're completely blindsided by it. Like they are just making so many mistakes, but he keeps getting blinded because, like you said, they keep getting these other guys out of nowhere, and like they actually strike pretty well in their drafts and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, they need to make better moves. They're not good enough. Um, yeah, it's crazy. Like you're talking about, oh, we re-signed Kevin Love. Like, all right, it hasn't been that
Yeah,
great.
that's if that's the biggest moves you're thinking of, it's you're not destined to be where you need to be. But granted, they know how to make us all look like we
Yeah.
don't know what we're talking about, right? They could we could say this right now and then watch them be one in the East by the end of this year. And it's I think there's merit in that, but there's also don't try to insult the obvious, right? Like
Mhm.
this is the obvious at this point, right? It's like It works, right? Like instilling a culture works, right? And I love that about them. But when the culture has this take over completely, all other advancements are ways to, it then becomes a detriment because now that's all they use as the excuse is the culture got them. The culture,
Yeah.
the Miami culture is just so potent. We are gonna find the right guys, but guess what? There's no planning for the future. Miami is Miami. I would have to do some research to look into it, but I don't think Miami has as much of their draft capital as we're led to believe right now.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That is I have to look into that exactly what it looks like, but it's they move some picks. They move some picks. They don't usually pick high anyways, but like it's just they're not preparing for a future and they have an aging leader in that way from a Pat Riley standpoint of it, right? Like, let's just be real. This life, like, he's getting older. There's going to be a point where Pat Riley cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
So, who takes that helm? Is it going to be Alonzo Mourning that takes this, instills the same culture, and continues with it? I don't know if it will still be the same culture at that point if it's a different person helming it. So
Yeah.
it makes me worry about them that they just don't take any swings at all. And the last one they did was Jimmy Butler, and you don't even want to pay that guy. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable why you don't want to. Just like he's older, he gets injured a lot, and yeah, he shows up when he needs to,
yeah,
but it's tough. And but like you said, it just they get bailed out by culture, and they also have like one of, if not the best head coach out there. So it just
definitely.
it's
I,
crazy.
I think
Yeah,
it, it's not even a question. He's the best coach in the NBA, probably for the last. He's been for the last, I would say, close to 10 years at this point. In my mind,
yeah.
presently at this point.
But no awards, no coach of the year awards for him.
Oh, that's just hating. That's just hating, man. It really is just hating. It almost is how LeBron has not gotten an MVP in like ages. So
Yeah.
it's just hating at this point.
Oh, I love that. All right. So this next one I'll do, it's we can go a little quick. I touched on it a little bit, but it's the Chicago Bulls. They have been the most puzzling organization in the last easily 5 years. And I feel like I talk about them so often. Every single time something's going wrong, it is the fact that what are they doing? Like, what has been their direction? Why do they always are on the losing side of every single trade that they do? It is they traded, so they put together Lonzo Ball, you got DeMar DeRozan, you got Zach LaVine, you got Nikola Vucevic, you got all these guys, and we all saw from a mile away this was not going to be a good team. Like, this was always going to be like a B level team, and that's exactly what they were. Now, most of those guys are gone. Yeah, you're getting Lonzo back this year. It looks like. Why did you re-sign Vucevic? Like, that was always very interesting last season. Like, I don't understand why you do that. Zach LaVine is like the worst asset out there in the NBA. That's always been a disaster. But the biggest thing is, all right, you make a good move in getting Alex Caruso. Last trade deadline, everyone would have traded so many assets for Alex Caruso, and yet you give him up for Josh Giddey, and that's all you would get. You don't get a first round pick back. You don't get anything back. I don't know why you even want really Josh Giddey, because he's a depreciated asset in the NBA because of all his stuff going on. He hasn't been played that well the last year. And then also, you have a really good point guard right now in Kobe White, and he was developing really well. So I don't understand. You have Lonzo, you have Kobe White, you have Zach LaVine, and now you add Josh Giddey into the mix. Like, I don't really understand why you do that. You could have got so much more in a million different places right there. That's crazy. You finally trade DeMar DeRozan, and that's a disaster because you barely get anything back. What did they get back? Chris Duarte in that trade? Like, I love Duarte. Like, I love him as an idea and as a flyer, but he hasn't been that great in the league. This team is just makes the worst moves. It's like they're trying to make the worst moves. They're trying to be on par with the Detroit Pistons right now. Like I just don't get what the Chicago Bulls are doing. It's a disaster. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's glaring when a team has no sense of direction, how everything goes the worst direction. Like we and it's not just a basketball thing, it's everywhere, right? Like you wouldn't buy a house without planning it out, right?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't anything in life. You won't go into it with no sense of direction of what you want to do. You don't just say, well, I want to have a house on the beach, and then you buy a house in the middle of the desert, right? Like everyone's gonna look at you like you're crazy after that, and that's the problem that I see developing with the Chicago Bulls. Is just like it's there's no clear direction, which means they haven't. That means they're only going to choose the worst direction is typically going to happen, and um, it's so sad because I think that they're doing a disservice to Zach Levine in his
Yeah.
career and making him look like he's less than a competent player than he really is. And it's not, and I know he spoke about that a little bit about how he feels about all of the noise that's being placed out there around him and why he can't be moved. But it just goes to show problem's not the team, it's not the roster, it is the front office. The front office is literally committing committing franchise malpractice at this point. Like literally do the value they're bringing to this team, and they're not doing it with the express interest of going towards a rebuild. No one made anything clear to you that that's what they want to do at this time. So when you go and you see you make damning decision after damning decision, and none of it points towards any direction, you could only think that it has to be that what I just said of
Hmm.
franchise malpractice. The DeMar DeRozan trade, let alone I don't even want to touch the Alex Caruso trade. That doesn't even need more words than what you said because it just doesn't make sense. Like that they even went down that road, that they to that. I don't even want to give it any time. I'm gonna go back to the player that they acquired after. But the DeMar DeRozan trade, for you not to get any to the for the Spurs to get the better draft pick in that trade when you move DeMar DeRozan, who is if they possibly forgot this, but as far as I remembered, he was runner up for clutch player of the year the last 2 years, Brian. I
Yep.
think that's what I remember seeing,
Yeah,
right?
that sounds right.
So I think he was also averaging around 25 points per game. Probably the best mid-range shooter in the game right now. Obviously, it's phasing out of the game, but it's still buckets, right?
Yep.
That's all I remember about DeMar DeRozan. When you trade that guy and you get nothing of note back, it's not that I was asking you to get a player. I'm asking you to even get players that you can develop from that trade. The fact that you got more, arguably, more in that Josh Giddey trade than you got in this DeMar DeRozan trade is just, again, once again, it just points towards franchise malpractice. Now, going on to Josh Giddey, I guess it's starting to make me think about this, and to everyone that is Australian that possibly listens or hears this, is this is not a disrespect to you guys, but it's starting to become clear to me that if you've touched or if you have made a name or you were born in Australia, you spend time in Australia, there's for some reason everyone that I know that's associated with the NBL or grew up in Australia has a high floor. But for some reason, they cannot reach that ceiling. Like you have
Yeah.
Ben Simmons, high floor. You have Josh Giddey, high floor. You have was it Dante Exum? I think it was
Yeah, it was
Dante
Exum.
Exum that
Hmm.
Dante Exum, high floor. You have the only person, and obviously he didn't grow up there, is Kyrie. That's the exception, right?
Mm.
Him. I mean, he was born there, but he didn't grow up there. That's the exception, right? And then you got. I say touch that world to even add LaMelo Ball. I know it's still early in his career. He still has a
Yeah.
lot to play. But right now, all I can see is a high floor and we can't even none of them are reaching their ceiling. So it's just interesting to see that much players from this area like not reaching their full potential that we placed on them. And it now going back onto Josh Giddey, hey man, like this is possibly the best place for you to reacclimate yourself, reestablish your name, start anew, and prove to the league that you have a place in this league. I know some people, and probably Josh Giddy apologists, will possibly say, hey, he was in a system where he wasn't allowed to be, the ball handler. He wasn't allowed to be the playmaker that he's shown when he was in NBL, and shown those flash of greatness, right? I mean, like, it's not going to be easy anywhere you go. There's always going to be someone on whatever team you go to at this point now that will possibly supersede what you're expected to do. And if you want to be that primary ball handler, you either have to show it very early or you're gonna have to come off the bench and show it. And a guy that got drafted, I don't even know how long. It's been like 3 years now. He's
Yeah,
been
I
in the
think so.
league.
I think so.
A guy 3 years in the league and with that much potential, so much that we put on his back, not to see anything back, and now having to possibly hope that it happens in Chicago, that is really sad for me. And then the last note on the Bulls is you've created a logjam of talent that now doesn't make sense, right? So it kind of is the situation we went into last year when we talked about the Nets, or thinking about the Nets. Is there was a bunch of guys made sense on another team. And it's
Yep.
starting to look like they have a bunch of guys that make sense on another team. And it's sad that they're trying to trade one of them and they are getting no offers. And obviously, we know how the CBA affects that
Yep.
reasonings. But to put that on put that on Levine, I don't think, and that is the last piece of that franchise malpractice that they're doing right now.
Yeah, it's one thing I actually forgot to mention as well is that you had pretty similar to like Alex Caruso, a guy that I feel like a lot of teams wanted at the trade deadline, and Andre Drummond, and this guy was getting a ton of rebounds on your team, playing really well, and then you let him just walk in free agency. So like there's just I don't know. We can go on, I feel like, for hours on the on Chicago Bulls.
And he went to your team as a negative asset, right? Like
Yeah.
he was not someone that you expected to do that.
Yep.
You just wanted him to potentially be a body at a point for this
Yep.
team. And he showed you that and people wanted him and he didn't do it. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, you rebuild his value and then just let him walk for fun. So it's wild. I know we had another topic to go on. We're almost at an hour. I say let's keep on if you have more winners and losers because I feel like there's plenty of other teams that we kind of want to touch on. Let's do some more rapid fire for some of these other teams. So, Jeff, give me a winner for you.
Another one of the winners that this is going to be more of on the obvious side of things with the Dallas Mavericks
Mm,
being able to bring in a guy like Clay, no matter what. This is the thing too. Again, perception always takes away from what really the player provides. Clay, bringing in Clay after that 0-10, everybody's going to talk to you about that 0-10. But Clay has still got an average 17 points last year. He was shooting his worst 3-point percentage. What was that? 38%. Some guys would dream of that. So you bring in Clay, you bring in, I think, honestly, this is a bigger low key move to me is bringing in Najee Marshall onto this team
for sure.
to help out with that wing depth after you lose a guy in. He just went to the Clippers. I forgot his name right now. I'm blanking. He Dunker. He
Oh,
one dunk.
Derek Jones Jr.
Derrick Jones. And
Uh,
honestly, Derrick Jones played out of his mind
did
last year in that playoffs, like compared to what we know him to be. So, like for you to be able to bring in a guy like Najee Marshall to replace him is why I got this team as winners, and honestly, really up there in the East and the West for me.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think they did a lot of really good things. I think kind of what I was saying before with Macau of like not necessarily being happy. It was pretty obvious, and there's a ton of reporting out there that Klay Thompson was not happy, and he was like very loud about it. Not necessarily on Twitter, but like behind the scenes, he was very loud about being unhappy. And now he's somewhere new, and it's a fresh start, and it's somewhere he can actually be happy again and come back to the player that he was. Um,
Yeah.
is he? I don't know if I'm like super high on him that it's gonna like transform their team, but I think he's gonna be good. I think he's gonna be better than definitely he's gonna be better than he was last season in my opinion. You mentioned Najee Marshall. That's a great pickup. I think getting rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. That guy as if anyone knows me, I'm actually a huge Tim Hardaway Jr. fan. I like watching him play. He's a lot of fun. He's not good for your team. Like I'll just say that. Like he's not someone that you want because he's the type of player that one night he's going to score 25, 30. He's going to go off. He's going to be amazing. And then the next 4 nights, he's going to score like 3 points and he's going to take like 8 shots. And it's like, oh, what do I do about this? Like this guy can win me some games and he can lose me some games. Dude, he's always
Yeah.
been super tough. He doesn't give you anything on defense. So you get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. You bring in Quentin Grimes, who's I've always been a big fan of him. That's a good flyer for them. Someone who can play some defense, hit some shots every once in a while. Like they've actually made a lot of really good moves. Um, and then yeah, just even thinking about all the moves they made off last season as well, and just like these guys are gonna get better. They're gonna get better. They reclaimed Kyrie and made him a valuable guy again, and like overall, they're setting up their team exactly the way you would want. No, man, they're doing good. Like the guys that they got rid of this offseason are guys that they don't really even want playing that much. So, I'm I think the Dallas Mavericks did a really good job. My next one is a pretty obvious one. And so I think there's two obvious ones. But I'm gonna have this one of just Philly, man. Philly did a good job. They as much as it pains me and as much as like I don't want to see them getting better, like I think I think they've kind of cemented themselves as one of the best teams in the East because of just getting someone like Paul George. Now, the one thing I actually am interested in, I heard Ben Simmons talk about not Ben Simmons, Bill Simmons. Jesus, I was like that sounded wrong. I heard,
He's coming back. He's
yeah,
coming back.
he's going. I heard Bill Simmons kind of talk about it, of just like Paul George in Philly is going to be interesting to see because of like how much pressure it is, and like if you think about the markets that Paul George has played, Paul George has kind of talked about too, like he doesn't want to be a number one option. He likes the more low key stuff, and now he's going somewhere with like one of the more like hardcore fan bases that like if you play terrible, they're gonna hate you. You're gonna be in the limelight. It's gonna be interesting. I'm sure Joel Embiid is at some point in the season is gonna be injured, and like it's gonna be up to Paul George to take a bigger load, which he did in uh in the Clippers in LA, but it's a little bit of a different light. But aside all that, still a really great pickup. Pick up Caleb Martin, which we talked about. You pick up Andre Drummond, which we talked about. Eric Gordon, I feel like the name is always better than what the player actually comes up to be, especially with all the teams that he's been on more recently, like Phoenix last year. And then yeah, I think overall this team has actually did a really good job surrounding, and I feel like they didn't have as much as you would expect, but like after signing Paul George, I feel like all those other fringe guys kind of wanted to go hop on the Philly bandwagon, and it worked out for them. What do you think, Jeff?
This is where we finally disagree. Um,
Oh,
so
okay.
there's reasons behind it. I do think Philly, the the Phillies, uh, going out there in the East this year, right? But I think the reason why I can't put them as a winner in my they're winner on paper, right? Like they're winners because they were able to bring in acquire a talent like like but my biggest issue is why I can't give them a winner. During this offseason, I was watching a lot of stuff, listening to a lot of stuff, and I watched that Beverly spoke on the personality of Paul George, right? And I know Pat Bev, he's a funny guy. Not a lot of people want to take him serious. You don't stay in the league this long, even though what he does is, back of the bench, end of
Yep.
the bench, like role. Usually are the best guys that could decipher what roles and personalities and what type of people are. Look at look at guys like Phil Jackson. He was an end of a bench guy at a time. You look at Tyler Lue, he was an so these guys typically become good coaches. So when Pat Bev spoke on what the bubble felt like, and correction and provide Paul George didn't seem like a player that wanted that correction. Was they ever see on another podcast where they spoke on something? I think it was Lou Will with Jeff Teague's podcast where he spoke about in that bubble they didn't want it to be there, right?
Mhm.
This is and they didn't make it. I don't think people want to throw him under the bus because Paul George is a in the league, right? In his circles, right? He's seen as a really take it to that next level, right? And you just what you just said, it attested to that, right? He have two guys that want to be that number one guy, but then one realizes, you know what, I'm gonna defer to this guy, right? Then a guy that just reclines to a point of, oh man, I don't even want that. Because if I'm gonna be honest with you, I think the issue that I'm gonna see we're gonna see start developing is that the Sixers become a team where could go crazy in the regular season, what they already do, right? But the same issues they have in the postseason are going to flare up because who's going to step up? Joel Embiid doesn't know how to step up. From what we've seen in his career, like we have not seen him step postseason at that point yet, right? Then you have Paul George that lacks the daisical approach to the game and developing the game, and that's exactly where when end of the bench guys are seeing that and saying that about you, that's glaring to me. Now, keep in mind all of the other pieces that they brought in in the off season. they did phenomenal to fill out this team, and that's why I wouldn't be shocked if they actually were the number one seed in the East again, right? But it doesn't mean they're going anywhere because we know what have looked like over these couple of years. We know how their mentality is. I know Nick Nurse, a team to the other side of the summit. I guess the rhetorical question I leave everyone with, and you, Brian, with, is if this guy is such a big Sixers, right? Why did Kawhi just say, "Hey, man, I do what you got to do"?
It's true. It's yeah, no, it is very true. And it's also just very telling to see of the Clippers. Like they know they're gonna get killed and dragged over the coals for not re-signing Paul George, but yet they still like refuse to give him that money. Like if he was like
Yeah,
that type of guy, they see how he is every single day, they would have just offered them money. But to them, they were like, that's not a winning formula, and it's only winning under this type of money, and it makes a lot of sense. I agree. Like it's maybe I'm falling into the trap of pretty similar. I remember last season I was very high on Phoenix. I was like, this team on paper like is fantastic. Like look at all these guys. Bradley Beal doesn't have to be the number one guy anymore. All this kind of stuff. Like I thought they're going to be so good, and it didn't necessarily turn out that way. And this can definitely be that scenario, but it just comes back to exactly what you're saying of it can either be fantastic or it can be a dumpster fire, and we have to see how it actually turns out.
I mean, we already project we're losing
Yeah,
20 games between these two guys in this
yeah.
season, right? Well, granted, I'll give him this. Paul George did play up to 70 games last season, the most he's played in a long time. I know
Mhm.
that rule that's in place with the NBA now, affecting that and causing players to play more, but it isn't merit. There's no merit to attendance, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that should not be the reason why you're considered who you're considered as, right? Like just because you're there, you need to do things that are impactful. And like you said, it's been a losing formula with someone that has won. Why would
Mhm.
I think it's going to be a winning formula with someone that struggles to even win a series?
Nah, it's true, man. It's interesting to look at. I think the biggest thing and the reason why I still have them as winners is they did the best they could. Like in this off season, like
They did.
this was like the most ideal and perfect path for them, and they executed on it. And so I got to give props. Got the best free agent, got a lot of the second, third options kind of free agents that people wanted to get, got them as well. So it's hard to poo poo on that, but overall, it is still just pretty risky and giving. It's interesting to see what this team is going to look like in 3 years because I want to see how that Paul George contract ages.
It's gonna be an interesting one.
um, Before we move on to the actual losers, is there any other winners you wanted to touch on real quick?
OKC, obvious one.
Yep.
Bringing in Alex Green mentioned, and then obviously Isaiah as well. Definitely helps out. I think draft pick too. I can't remember who they picked up, but I know they got a draft pick. I just don't remember who the player was. Oh, it was Topic.
Yep.
Bro, we know we know they're gonna figure it out to make this
Hmm.
guy uh, an amazing piece as well too. So it's funny too because if you look at Topic's like background, he has a very Josh Giddey like background of
Yep.
like how he plays. So they literally got rid of Josh Giddey and said they got Josh Giddey at home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think they say for
Yeah.
him he's not supposed to play this season because he's like injured or whatever. But still, like if there's any team that can take pretty much like a Michael Porter Jr. type of move of, hey, here's this guy who's supposed to be really good, but he's gonna fall in the draft because he's injured, and we can just like not play him for the first year, him heal up, and then he's gonna come through and he's gonna be really good, because they can afford to do that. I think something else, at least about OKC, is like I can't remember their names, but they have like two role players that they're able to like re-sign in this offseason for like not a lot of money. Um, Man, I wish I could remember their names right now, but overall, like all the moves that they're doing are fantastic. They still have all those millions and billions of draft picks and everything, and yet they have, if not the best roster in the entire NBA. This team is set up so well. It's insane. Yeah, hard not to give OKC uh, a winner title. They're too obvious, so I understand why we didn't want to touch on them too much.
Yeah.
Anything else for you?
I will say on the player side of it, as a winner, that's where I agree with you. Paul George is definitely he got that was the only curveball I had left
All
for my
right.
winners.
Real quickly, I think I can say something like I think Minnesota. I can give a winner of just like thinking about how little assets they actually had this season and or this off season, still like able to make some pretty good and needed moves. I thought was pretty solid, but and I'll say like even like a team like the Nets, like picking a direction was pretty important. Blowing it up, they still have some moves to make. You know, you still got some guys on the roster that I'm sure teams would want to trade for. So that's going to be interesting to see. But I think the Nets are are a low key winner this offseason.
I think that it's going to be the problem is it's going to be challenging to move these last couple guys. I think that they do get moved. I don't think that they're going to go for anything sequential for any team, right?
Yep.
Or it's going to just be hard with the new rules set aside to move a guy for $20 million just to be sitting in a corner and playing defense, you know.
Yeah. Uh,
But granted, they do got guys that went to the Olympics. They got a Dennis Schroeder. Hey, hit us up.
there you go.
If you need a point guard, Dennis Schroeder's out there, you know?
Nice. Do you have any more losers you want to touch on?
Oh, do I? I will spin the block on the Lakers. I couldn't
Ooh.
forget about the
All
Lakers.
right, all right.
So when no disrespect to Dalton Connect, but when Dalton Connect and Bronny James and no disrespect to Bronny James either, but are the moves and bringing in a JJ Redick are the biggest moves you made over this offseason. I think you didn't do anything consequential this or
Mhm.
helpful this offseason, right? Um I don't understand how they believe that they move up or move down. Well, I think they know that they're going to move down in the standings this offseason when you don't move anything. You re-sign your guys in D'Lo, and I believe Reeves was also re-signed this year.
Max
I
Christie.
believe so. Max Christie, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, you don't really do nothing of note. So that again, same thing I said with the Heat. It just makes me very puzzled. Why would you do that? Why would you not consider any movement, especially in the gauntlet that is the Western Conference?
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing to me about them is as much as I love JJ and he can be really good, to bring in a guy that's really like never coached before, and I think like the only other coaching he's done is coaching his middle school like son's team or whatever. Like that's the kind of coach he goes from coaching that to now the Lakers and everything. And look, I'm sure JJ's a great NBA mind, um,
Yeah,
but right now you have LeBron James, you have Anthony Davis. Like these guys are people that want to win now, and yet they're kind of teetering between, oh, let's try to win a championship and let's develop a bunch of young guys. Because it's like you bring in JJ,
yeah,
in my opinion, when you want to develop a lot of these young guys like a Dalton Connect and Max Christie and that kind of stuff. And I guess Bronny James, but we can see how that turns out. Um, but like, yeah, it's just that's not a winning move. You don't bring in JJ who's never been on a assistant coach bench or whatever. Yeah, he's been on the NBA bench as a player, but I think it's gonna be tough. They're gonna lose a lot of games because of a bad decision JJ makes, and like that's not what you want when you're trying to win LeBron's last championship type of stuff. So
yeah.
it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad for them.
I agree.
Real quickly, I kind of want to touch on at least the Clippers of just the whole way this offseason kind of went for them is pretty disastrous. I mean, yeah, we kind of talked about like Paul George and maybe why you don't want to re-sign him and that kind of stuff and gave him a little leeway there, but like anytime you have a superstar star player and they walk for free, that's to me that's a franchise killer move. Like that kills you for the next 5, 10 years type of stuff. Because what when these teams when you trade your all-star, that rebuild that starts to rebuild. That starts everything because you get a bunch of picks back. You get some young assets back. You get all these kind of stuff. To but like
Yeah,
they traded all their assets and then they let this guy walk. They don't recoup anything and it's just a disaster. Yeah, you're gonna recoup some stuff when it seems like eventually they're probably gonna have to trade Kawhi or something like that, or maybe they don't have to trade Kawhi because one, they re-signed them, I believe, and then two, they have their new arena and everything. They're not gonna want to. It's a disaster. They're playing middle of the road. It's so bad. I think, like I said, I think it's the worst thing a team can do is let your superstar guy walk for nothing.
let's. You brought up the sign that doesn't mean anything nowadays. We saw it with you guys that signed. So there really isn't no there put to paper anymore. Um, I it's what makes him the more flagrant and why they're a loser is that not only did you have an offer in hand from the Warriors to pick up
Oh,
Paul George, you just spited them. You just said no, we're not going to do that. We don't want to do that. And it wasn't because you had a better offer. You just didn't want it to the Warriors, which is, again, you're not thinking as this. It is a business, and you right it personal, and you're not allowing for what you said the Nets just did, right? Like the Nets, same town as the Knicks, they did not mix any makes the actually better. So whatever you get back or recuperate in assets, you better make it worth your while. So they were going to give you an offer that was worth your while, and you chose no. I would have held them to the fire. You would have given me pods. You would have given me Kaminga. You would have
yeah.
given me picks. It would have been so far out. Kids would be able to see when that pick got drafted. That's what it would have been. I know obviously you can't go that far out, but like you could go about 7 years out. Yeah, like
Yep.
7 years out, bro. taking picks, and I'm running with that because a team like the Clippers, you lose this opportunity. You got to remember what you were before Lob City. That's what you're asking to be again once you make a decision like this with no clear direction of what you want to do next. When you're the brought up earlier, when you're the Bulls, it's okay because the Bulls have an established brand that is going to transcend time at this point with Jordan. So people are always going to want to know about you or remember your team at that point, right? Whereas I don't got that. So good luck rebuilding. It ain't gonna be easy.
Nah, I agree. It's gonna be pretty bad. It's gonna be pretty bad. I'm interested to see how this turns out, and it's gonna be funny to see in like 3 years where this team is and if they still have Kawhi and everything. But yeah, I say so. We're already at an hour 20. I say let's wrap it up here. I'm sure that there's a lot of other teams I even like kind of have and players I want to talk about. But we can save that for another episode because we still got a little bit until the NBA off season's over and they get starting to become games, and we can talk more about analytics and everything. But I think that's enough for now. Jeff, is there anything you want to say before we call an episode?
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with what we just talked about, but it is along the lines of thank you again for anybody that decides to stay with us and listen to us talk about these great topics about the NBA. Obviously, me, Brian, so motivated by this, so motivated to keep on about this and continue providing this to you. But are watching and we are in the of the changing of the cards in the NBA. And it's going to be amazing to see, right? We're clearly seeing through even in the international games, you brought up the Olympics a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
the game's changing, man. Like the guys that we know, the guys of note, are guys that are in these other countries. Uh, we we went into this Olympics with guys played in the are later in their career in Steph Curry. Um, Guys like LeBron that sat out a couple Olympics to come back and play in this, and it was still a tough one. You
Oh.
know, it was not a just like cakewalk like they are accustomed to. Man, they lost to South Sudan. Like they almost lost to
Yeah,
South
yeah.
Sudan, but they didn't lose. Almost to South Sudan. It's a lot tighter. And honestly, it's the best thing for the league. We're getting different plays and watch their maturation and their growth. And lastly, do not sleep on the Bucks. We didn't even bring them up once.
Oh, so true.
People have been sleeping on the Bucks, and I think we'll talk about this later. I'm sure in future episodes we'll talk about who we think is prediction for the finals. But as I say, I'm not saying that they're my pick, but I'm saying don't sleep on them, and that's it. That's it for me.
I like that. I like that. I think there's something about when these big trades happen, you just need a year to work things out. I mean, we saw this with Minnesota with like Jeff, I know you called it a while ago, like when they first made that Rudy Gobert trade, we're like, that team's gonna be amazing, and then they weren't, and then the following year, they did what they did, and they were actually one of the best
Very.
teams. So it's crazy. I can definitely see that happening with the Bucks, but we can get more into that when the time happens. Yeah, man, it's been fun. I'm glad we are able to do this again. Many more conversations to have, many more topics to cover. So be on the lookout for all the listeners. And yeah, this has been episode 61.
Peace.